Special Collections and Archives here in Geisel Library, and I'm super thrilled to have you here for the second New Writing Series reading of 2025, and the first of this year in the Seuss Room, which I love because it's my home. A quick thank you to the bookstore. Thank you for being here. They've got books for sale, so everybody please purchase a book after the reading, or 2 books rather. If you need to leave the reading early, please make sure you use that back door that's over by the restrooms so that you don't disturb the reading happening up here. And can everybody please remember to turn off your cell phones right now? Just make sure those are muted. Thank you. And with that, I'm going to bring up Professor Anna Joy Springer.
Ooh, you're the best. Thank you. It's so good to see all of you here. It's a good full house, and you are not going to be disappointed that you came to see Ignacio Carvajal, who may be your professor, your friend, or your hero, and Timmy Straw, who will soon be, if not already. And it's going to be a fantastic reading. Both poets are also translators and scholars and cool people. So I hope that the Q&A at the end of the reading I know it'll be lively. I just wanted to draw your attention to, first of all, I want to thank the Department of Literature for significantly funding the New Writing Series this year. Every single year we look for new funding, and this year it was like 90+% the Literature Department funding the series, and also excellent Black Studies Project and excellent Archive for New Poetry for this quarter. So our next reading is super exciting on the 5th at 5 right here. Danielle Vogel, poet, writer, witch, herbalist, and partner of Renee Gladman, my old college mate from New College, first person who ever published me, and that's not the most important thing about Renee. The most important thing about Renee is that she is a phenomenal writer and is doing a lot of drawing lately as well, so she's going to be talking about intersections of text and image, and that will be here at 5, and then the following reading on 219, which you can see here, and then our last reading of the quarter on 312. That's entirely sponsored by Black Studies Project on 312. So keep your eyes peeled for information about those. I think that they're all super enjoyable. You will not want to miss them. And so our first poet is coming up in just a bit, and they are going to be introduced by Fiona Martinez, who you may have seen read last week, an MFA writer who will introduce them now.
Okay. Hi, thank you everyone for being here. This is such a good turnout. I'm honored to be introducing Ignacio Carvajal, who was one of the first professors that I met when I arrived here a few months ago. While he is an assistant professor of Spanish and comparative literature here, I was first introduced to him as a poet, and I'm so glad that you will get to hear him in this capacity today. From talking to Ignacio about the difficulties of balancing teaching and academic production and survival with creativity, I get the sense that they are in agreement with Gloria Anzaldúa when she said, "There is no separation between life and writing." And in my mind, there is no separating the poet from the educator, the scholar, the translator, or the reader that Ignacio is. The poet comes across in the way he opens our Spanish class each day, asking us how we can alter a sentence like, ¿Qué significa decir algo que no existe? What does it mean to say something that doesn't exist? Luckily, he's not seeking answers, but transformations, which is a good thing because he poses this to us at 8 a.m. But I truly admire the care and community by which he goes about building this classroom space. Beyond this, Ignacio's research centers Mesoamerican literature and culture, having earned their PhD in Latin American literature at UT Austin. They also research indigenous language texts and their relationships to colonialism, and work to develop pedagogy for teaching indigenous languages, especially Quiche, a Mayan language. Ignacio was born in Costa Rica and later moved to Kansas. Their identities and environments blend across poems, sometimes dashing in and out of languages, carrying flashes of many países, nombres, and traditions. Ignacio has been published in several reviews and anthologies, and his bilingual collection of poems, Plegarias, won first place in the poetry contest Poetic Bridges by Casa Cultural de las Americas in Houston. In 2021, Ignacio's chapbook-length poem called Allow, a Litany was published in La Resistencia Press. Allow is an extended prayer punctuated by flame. These plegarias wash over the reader in a rapid succession of litany, constantly pushing us forward, insisting on a future stoked by fire, by surrender, and by the tender and sometimes erratic nature of prayer. Sometimes in his poems, dreams are heavy. La pesa mucho, algo que no tiene nombre. And sometimes realities are freeing. In my favorite passage, Ignacio, or a prophet, or a poet, or all three, pray. Allow us, on the road from El Paso, to see the Mexico mountains and the Texas hills, an ageless proof of the futility of human borders. Please welcome Ignacio.
Wow, I didn't know how I was going to get through today, even before hearing that. Thank you so much. That's, I don't even have the words for such a beautiful and generous introduction. And I do ask them to come up with transformations on a sentence at 8 a.m. in the morning. So thank you for putting up with that. Okay, thank you. It's such an honor to be here. I'm so happy to be here. It's so exciting to read for the New Writing Series. Thank you, Anna Joy, for inviting me. Thank you, Nina, for always holding us down with the recording and the hosting. Thank you to each and every one of you for being here, because times are tough. And thank you, Timmy Straw, for sharing space with me. I'm so excited, and it's been so beautiful to meet you. I'm going to read 3 of my own poems. I'm going to read a really old poem about winter, because I used to live in Kansas, a place that had winter every year, and then I moved to these really warm places that don't. I lived in Austin, where I went to grad school, and now I'm here. So I'll also close with a newer poem, since this is the New Writing Series, that's a little bit about that. And in the middle, I'll read from Allow, which is over there. Thank you to the bookstore. But I want to open by reading someone else's poem, as I sometimes like to do. And I'm going to read this poem that is a poem by Timmy Straw in the collection, the Thomas Salto, that we'll hear from today. This is entitled The Axe. Occasionally, our freedom intrudes on us, like real sunlight through a snow globe, like real sunlight on a painted sun. Hot as a fresh-cut tree, as a flung side-dappled saw, to turn and see it face to face, to be both sight and the self it swings upon. Or if this is, as warning said, unbearable, then finally to take the axe and cleave the two. And God bless the axe then, and God bless the axe. That's Timmy Straw, everybody. At the pet store, there is a sick fish tank. In it, the guppies and goldfish sulk, their gills opening and closing slowly as they circle. One fish floats belly up against the corner of the glass tank, its tail fin and sides partially nibbled away. It is not hunger that drives this, only the habit of eating. There is a heavy, heavy fog outside. The drivers strain their eyes. The beams of their headlights turn to cones of dust and vanish ahead. They don't illuminate the road, that familiar path to follow. Instead, they might materialize the void that we usually glide through. It is now a visible cloud. Heads lean closer to windshields, hoping it remains penetrable. What a fogged up January. I can see the breath of bodies as they navigate the slush and ice. The warmth refuses to stay hidden and rises in puffs of mist from their mouths. We are threaded bundles of cloth, slow treaders, slip and slide soles, buckling knees and warm fingers. There is no time like this to hide our faces, to bury our chins into our chests and look down our wet noses, to hope the very cold we run from conceals us. Winter places ice blades in our hands. It begs us to dig into its belly, not to stop until we find spring and slash through the seasonal cord. The carnage is unavoidable. The carnage is necessary. Winter places ice blades in our hands and begs. And I'll read from aloud. It's not so new, 2021, but there are many things that I'm proud about this book. I'm proud and grateful to M.G. Salazar, who is the editor of La Resistencia Press, and from the beginning I agreed to give all of the proceeds of the book to the International Mayan League. Shout out to the International Mayan League. I'm proud of Ariana Linares, who designed the cover of the book. And I'm also proud because in the back there's a QR code that you can scan to listen to a recording of me reading it with a composition, a musical accompaniment that artist and wonderful person Dorian Wood composed specifically for the poem. So even if you can't get the book, you can find me and you can scan it and get the book. The prophet, the only one I ever did know, twitched upon a throne of Jameson and mourning, wondering if to love is to kill, if to speak is to lie, if to live is to doom. Allow the prophet to draw his own conclusions and report back to us, to demand of this carnivorous world an allowance not of silver, but of impetus. Allow us to remember the faces of our parents, that they met on some day and hoped eternal, that they were stupid like us but didn't know it, and had us, because there is no future without progeny, because there is no legacy without a firstborn. Allow us in those rarest of moments of sensibility and wisdom to forgive them, because they were stupid like us but didn't know it. Allow us to keep in mind that they kissed on some corner and went to their respective friends to tell about it, that they fucked for a first time and a millionth, and that out of that pleasure or out of that chain, we busted forth. Allow our parents not to be irreversibly disappointed about the ink on our skin and the booze on our breath, about our nonsensical soliloquies and the friends we have chosen. Allow our mothers to be forgiven for ever asking for our forgiveness, for convincing themselves that God is watching and put us in this world for something sacred. Allow for the recompense of our mothers, for their celestial rewards to be granted early, for a damn advance on their salvation. Allow for a litany of their grace to be written and proclaimed every Monday by the school children. Allow mother to find peace and father to find patience. Water, not coffee. Been up for a long time. Allow for the miracle of winter to continue, for the snow to crunch under our feet but never kill us. Allow for the frozen pond to be the mirror where we find the pain and beauty of our face on a gray morning. Allow us not to shrink away from the embarrassment, to slip and fall on black ice so we may remember that our bones are brittle and our ailments fleeting. Allow the southern fools to at least vacation northward so they may understand the ice and its renewal, so they may shiver in the hope of future fire. Allow for the miracle of winter to crush our spirit, to remind us that we're nothing but a herd of soft mammals yearning for food and for shelter. Allow for the most secret magic of our minds to fester in these months under the inevitability of ache and solitude. Allow it enough strength to blossom in the spring. Allow us enough fortitude. Allow the mockingbird to perch and flutter from the tallest light post. Allow it to reproduce and bring more white-striped surprise into this world. We need it. Allow the mockingbird to become official bird of the continent. Allow it to conquer us and rid us of our tongues, to impose upon us its language. Allow the mockingbird. Allow the rain to come down. Allow the tempest. Allow the whirlwinds of the world. Allow the poor to elbow and knuckle bleed on the teeth of the barons, of the counts, of the presidents. Allow them to pick out their gold fillings, to melt their silver watches down for new bullets. Allow the policeman's baton to be a pendulum and break his bones upon returning from its war arc. Allow our friends to live near us, or visit, or call, or write, aunque sea. Allow us to remember their names and flaws, their joys and triumphs, their addresses and contradictions. Allow their breaking suffering to be a moving shadow cast by a flag will burn, unpledged allegiance. Allow us to pledge only unto those who toil with the sincerity and light of the damned, and knowing, with mugre under their fingernails, with calamity wrapped around their limbs, with the crushing hate of the world upon their shoulders. Allow us to find them baking on the Texas limestone, wiring circuit in Kansas City, picking up the phone in Topeka, lighting new fires in Tecumseh, loving as they will on the Red River, ascending to the top of the White Mountains, speaking still in Forest County, choosing words carefully in Milwaukee, tending to the flowers in Torreon, making new life in Pullman, producing tunes in Miami, punching out hard poetry in Hostile City, bent over the books in Boston, strumming guitars in Long Island, drowning in White Kansas, painting portraits and glittering and touching together the right wires, and teaching and scribbling and writing in Austin, resting a bat upon their shoulders, zeroing in on possibility, making out of love a series of islands, stretching mind of body in Champaign, surrendering not in the West Bank, surviving and praying and mourning in Gaza, muriéndose en White Kansas, limpiando hospitales, rezando rosarios, sacando cuentas, haciendo buen ver su vida en Chepe, buscando ciudades inundadas en Atitlán, elevando el humo y la lengua por todo el altiplano, temblando en alguna cantina de Shela, oyendo algún órgano sonar en Oaxaca, desempolvando historia en el defectuoso, brincando como liebre allá en Tijuana, averiguando la coyuntura en Carolina, con elefantes papalotes en Los Ángeles, ardiendo con el fuego eterno, ardiendo, rising in White Kansas, rising above it, burning brighter that it knows what to do with. Allow us to find them, allow us to find them, allow us to gift them might and loyalty. Allow the prophet to sit upon his jagged throne and tell us whether to live is to kill, whether to speak is to lie, whether to live is to doom. Thanks. I appreciate it. I'm so thirsty. Okay, this is my last poem. It's tentatively entitled A Love Letter to Queer Surf. Last week Fiona read a poem after Ocean Vuong. And I'm going to read this poem, which is also after Ocean Vuong. And I wrote it, and it includes phrases even from when we visited last fall and had a beautiful, wonderful conversation with our own Lily Wong. So this is a love letter to queer surf after Ocean Vuong. It is new shit. Kelly says, when you arrive, greet the big water, tell who you are and why you are there. I bring it my clumsiness and impatience and a small gift that floats away. Ocean witnesses my love and nakedness, my noviceness at gliding. Ocean says that perhaps healing is an overdetermined destination, exaggerated by our will to consumption, but holds me as I try to learn a thing from the beginning, from zero in number and fixation. Holds when I know no other way of prayer, when excited and humbled, but also rocks me. Not rocks me, but rocks me. Says Ocean that poetry is the perfect technology for contesting a hegemonic sense of order and cohesion. Cohesion for whom, Ocean asks, and the question comes back, how do you come to terms? And Ocean yells back, I do not come to terms, but there are rails and a stringer. Ocean says that there is a metabolism for sorrow, that rid of it, we may become evacuated of our seeking. I have no use for absolution. There are too many lights and bases along the coast, and war machines sweeping seaward. And despite my infrequent visit and bow and offering, Ocean remains and recognizes patiences and roots. It is most often kin bringing us together. It may just be we built a vessel, and as we learn to, Ocean says, come and breathe and churns and churns. Thank you all so very much.
That was so beautiful. Thank you so much. Ainsley Morse is going to introduce our next author, so I'm just going to leave it, but I'm going to introduce Ainsley.
Oh,
new
okay.
faculty, new friend, loving it.
Yes, love it.
Thanks. Yeah, I was going to explain why I'm here. But Anna Joy mostly covered that. I started here at UCSD in August, so I'm new to the scene. I specialize in Russian, East European literature. I see some of my students here. It's great to see you. So even though I'm, supposedly an expert in something, I find it strangely difficult to talk about Timmy Straw's poetry. Because when I read these poems, I experience this combination of something like the shock of recognition and something that is the opposite of shock, an unthinking acceptance of the right and maybe even the only way of doing the work of seeing and finding poetry in the world. During Timmy's visit here, we've been circling around this word and really this category of the unassailable. It keeps coming up. Kind of like the ultimate criterion for art getting it right. But I think I would add that like this rightness, and I'm sure there are so many people in this room who do this work of writing, it is like the world and us in the world, very messy, very tentative, very slant. So I think when you hear these poems, you'll hear what I mean. I'm gonna do like an actual introduction. It's mostly from the flyer. Timmy Straw is from Oregon. This is their first book of poetry. It came out last year with Phonograph Editions. And I'm actually going to say a word about the title, the Thomas Salto. They are in grad school right now at the University of Pennsylvania. So those of you who are in grad school, solidarity. It's never too late, never too early. But in addition to this book, Timmy's poems have appeared in all kinds of wonderful publications, also translations. And I wanted to make sure to say that Timmy is especially for me, a wildly generous collaborator. We met because we both wanted to translate the same poet. And some of my most exciting and long-lasting collaborations in life have happened because of this. Some usually dead poet brings together people somewhat unexpectedly. In this case, it's Grigory Dashevsky, another astonishingly direct and rigorous poet translator of the late Perestroika and early post-Soviet period. And we actually, Timmy suggested that we'll read a couple of our co-translations of Dashevsky at the end. So just as a final note, I wanted to say, because I was, like probably most of you, unaware of the background for the title of this book, The Thomas Salto, and I just wanted to read, there's a really beautiful kind of short essay at the beginning of this collection, and I just wanted to read the part of the first paragraph, just to pique your curiosity, about the salto. The Thomas Salto is a very difficult and dangerous move in gymnastics. It is also beautiful in the uncanny and sometimes sickening way of a salmon throwing itself up a waterfall. A 1.5 salto backward in a piked or straight position with 1.5 twists and landing not, as is customary, on the feet, but in a forward roll. It's this landing that makes the move so risky. If the gymnast doesn't launch themselves high enough in the air and with sufficient velocity, it's easy to botch the roll. I just thought that would be a good teaser. All right, so I'm so happy that Timmy could come here and that you're all going to get to hear this work. Thank you.
Hello. I too want to say some thank yous. This was a very difficult week, as we all, I think, are aware, and it was unexpectedly good to be here for it, for a set of reasons, which I won't walk you all through, but certainly to spend time with Ainsley, who is a dear friend, and her family, and to be in a part of the world that I strangely love. Southern California is really bizarre, but also really surprisingly hallucinatory and magical also. And then to meet Ignacio yesterday and to have a kind of wonderful conversation with them, one of those times out of time for me, and yes, allow them the Mockingbird. So thank you for sharing this reading with me, and for having me out. I live in New York right now, which has had a cold spell psychically, politically, as well as materially. So I'm going to start actually with 3 poems from a project I'm working on now, which are this string of psalms, actually kind of weird imprints or kind of ventriloquisms of King David, who, I think, as many of us know, wrote the Psalms. Also is kind of a monstrous figure in the Hebrew Bible, a war criminal essentially, who also speaks with the tongues of angels. So this is very felt like a moment I wanted to look closer at. They have they're nothing like the Psalms that they're ripped from, of course. But this is Psalm 30. A proof begins in its self-evidence, that I, for instance, warm myself on what I find, not am. That I in interest raised myself outside and drifted up, mercenary as a chime, and saw it all, the family dinner winking through the blinds, their faces in the steam of bread or casserole. I was not there. I drifted up and past the starry water wheel, the decade gleaming, bucketing, sloshing down and beautiful. I saw it all, those years, when stateless amazement overtook the West. That I in boredom bore myself outside and seesaw there, braced like a star. That I am to myself dingy or indistinct as others' effort is, and bear as sentiment their sentences. That across the warehouse cold or dawn's damp grass I make deliveries. I know the town and roads that way. That one day we might find together, you and I, loose in the hulk of copied things, a fish, original and freely moved. But if I care to diagnose, or diagnose because I cannot care, a proof will end when it is evident. A stranger and you took me in. I disembark but cannot land. And this is also, I think a lot about enemies, and this is kind of me like wanting to like fight with this figure, this king, this David. So this is it's pardon me as I bring you into. This is Psalm 3. Some of them have lines from the translations of the Psalms. You have kissed the wig, have stood between the window and its drapery, and looked into the street like a spy at his assassin, like an assassin at his woman, like a woman, you say, at herself. You have brought your lunch up here to the very offices of time. From that mirrored escrow, the dark patches fall. They have fallen on me also. Beneath the planks of the conceit, the ground is very far. But you have kissed the wig, have fused the starry principle, have stood the plinth of finance from which angels crowd and watch the air happening gradually to them. Your boyhood home will hang like Absalom on air in Edom, where the air stirs in the dunes all the unpeopled months of principal time. This all Saul sang, and limping there, brackish to the very crotch and destitute. Drip, drip went the well. My hate has made me well, no person in between. And then one more from the psalm. How can I sing the Lord's song in a strange land, he says. Because the Lord and the song are smaller than you thought. You cannot, I thought. Or because the land mattered more than you knew, and yourself you knew not. You cannot. And sitting and sterile and wetting each breath and dragging each sundown down, as if man were the mean of his measure and proof that denying the pleasure he took had left it untaken. Clean up yourself, then clean up my mother. If guesses were horses that ride the dead distance from manhood to Kansas, for instance, guess why they ride and who for? So the Salto, the Thomas Salto, I originally was interested in this particular gymnastics move because there was a gymnast, a Soviet gymnast in the 70s. She was an orphan, so she was a ward of the state, who was virtuosic. And she was recruited by the Soviet national team to compete in the 1980 Moscow Olympics. And she was, you can say she was pressured, she agreed, it's hard to know what agency means in those conditions, but she ends up, because she can execute this move, the Thomas Salto, she agrees to do it for the Olympics. And this move has, in the past, only been sort of possible by gymnasts that were, male, biologically male. And so she breaks her leg in training, or she injures her leg in training, but again keeps trying to perfect the move. And a few weeks before the Olympics, she mistakes the role and breaks her neck. She lives, but is paralyzed from the neck down. And her name was Yelena Mukhina. And something about sort of the figure of her life and person felt very in kinship to the ways that bodies and lives were sort of experiencing the state decanted into their small form in the 80s, for instance, under Reagan. So I was thinking a lot about my own childhood and about sort of the war on drugs and, of course, AIDS and the sort of proxy wars in Central America as this sort of figure moving inside of her image as well. And, of course, the Soviets being our dancing partner and our enemy. So this book is in some strange way dedicated to her. She died, I think, in 2003 of complications, but to her from her injuries. So I'm going to read the title poem, which is it's not a bad thing for a boxer to keep all the teeth he ever knocked out, and in old age glue them one by one to a dry corn cob, to show his trophies to the neighbors, to smile because his teeth remain. When pride is stateless, it is laborious. When pride is laborious, it is forgiven. It's not a bad thing to die on the 7th day and perish on the 8th, to be buried on the 9th day and interred on the 10th. Deborah brushed the Sinai with a comb, and still she found no flea. Laws, facts, phenomena all shine in the body of their host, and who here is not a host? But it is wrong to steal for pleasure till you know what pleasure is. Wrong to live your suffering, unless by this you mean one suffers you their bed. Pain loves the dawn, darkness, the dinner, and a bank teller in a hair shirt won't redeem the sin of finance. As you said, real tragedy doesn't kill the hero, it kills the chorus. But I know a good card game. You can play it forever. I call it Dogs. Do you want to live forever? This is a poem called The Little Song in the Locrian. And the Locrian is a mode. I play music, and there are these modes that are like, I'm kind of fascinated by because they're just structures of feeling, really. And each mode is a little bit, is arranged according to relation. So the Locrian has this strange sound that sounds to me like crumpling tinfoil very closely in your ear. It's a very unpleasant mode. They often describe it as being unfinished, like it doesn't seem to come to a conclusion. And it's a very bright, loud mode. Anyway, little song in Locrian. I have two things, sang the bird from the pin oak. Two things have I, the answer back. The world is in its message today. The world is in its keys. The sun in it flashes like a flag in pavilion, like a frog's throat flashing in the sun. And there are things that must be said, I know. Awful and simple as children yelling out, our mother is dead. A fact will baptize a brain for a while, but what makes the baptism stay? I have two things, sings the bird in the pin oak. Two things have I, the bird in the eaves. A tuning met and gone like the look the two hostages gave when they passed at the neutral middle of the bridge. I grew up in Oregon, in a part of Oregon where the mills were all closing when I came into being. So you'd see these just hulks of with piled up logs. This poem's called The Astronomer's Hands. Last spring the mill closed. A family was evicted. At night they slept in the car like angels thrown against a tree. The years for hooded children moving upwards through a telescope very quickly. Should the loons by the bay be real, preserve us. Stuck together like two gulls pulling apart, a fish in the bright air, bickering, shrieking, accelerating by our unison the divide. And this is a poem, actually, it's the oldest, it's actually sort of, weirdly I'm realizing it's the first poem that I wrote. And I'm reading it because Kazim Ali actually asked if I would, and we met wonderfully 10 years ago. I don't think you even remember that we met, but we did. And in fact, I was very new to writing poetry and to reading it, and it was at a dinner, and Kazim took a book of Lucille Clifton down from the host shelf and read some poems, and that's how I learned about Lucille Clifton. So anyway, thank you. Sorry if that was just odd. This is called Puget Sound, which is a body of water in the state of Washington. It's just all of these islands, and it's kind of like a labyrinth. These are things my mother told me about my father. Your father is made of glass. We have to help him keep closed. Early on, the water drank him up. Everything he lost alone. Father, mother, wife, his work, his sons. The dumb, impartial revenge water takes to solids. God is still with us. But if your father flinches in the presence of love, this is why. The flinch of love, I have it with you now. Grief moves with the logic of creeks, interlocked by trout, by light, by ordinary water, led to the lowlands. The first quiet idea is to endure. This is, I guess I'm in Oregon at the moment, or the West. This is called The Pinwheels of Goshen. I was just in a. It feels like everything. All these poems are so doomful. The question. But I don't read them that way, and then suddenly when they're out loud, you're like, oh, this was actually these pinwheels in a graveyard. So, but I was not thinking of it in those terms. It's just that they were in a graveyard in the prairie on the Umatilla Reservation in Eastern Oregon, and when the wind comes up, they turn, but not evenly because some of them are older than others. So they have this funny way of looking like living beings talking. Okay. For centuries, men have thought there are arches asleep in women that hold men up. For decades, men have gone to Goshen. For decades, men have been men and posing there with apricots, carolins, with drowned men in the lake, and have said and saved themselves in saying it. All the poses hurt. But decades are a dangerous measure. By them, a man can say he knows himself and scratch with chalk beak on the pissoir the icon on the coin. A sun sets in a mirror, sets in a killed sheep's eye, sets on the pinwheels in the porches of Goshen, of Kentucket, generous sunset. Kill the lion, kill the loin. The first wisdom is to eat what comes. From this comes taste, and then the family line. Likewise, a man will strip copper for cash to pay rent on the little house, and he will set the house on fire. And similarly, a person will fold up in his semblance and live and touch another person from this position. And there are men asleep in men that are time's measure, as man is time's measure, as any wrong is still a motion of the truth. And all creation is alone in its weather, but not like my father is alone, drawing a door frame on the kitchen wall with a piece of chalk, sketching, there the handle, there the latch, saying, in his doorman's voice, his hoarse, unhearing need, here I am, come in. I'm going to read one more from here, and then maybe we could read a few Dostoevsky. Okay. Let's see. This one's kind of like a little, where did it go? It's called That Too Is Stealing. I grew up in this really kind of grim evangelical church that my brother, who's older than me, called me up to talk to me very stressed out about today. Like, we're all haunted by it, as one is sometimes by these things. But it had a janitor closet with a linoleum floor that you could go in and no one would be there, and you could just sit and be alone and away from the vibe. So this is kind of a song to this janitor closet in this particular church. In the janitor closet of two alone, among the brooms and chemicals, a bulb, a mouse, some vinegar, the little shelf, and thee. Was it waiting, I said, or stealing, you said? The body is not the song, but the bearing of the song, and nothing to tell of it, took even the thought of it. The cool at the bottom of the psalm, as praise is cold to touch, as heat gone cold in utterance, the jealous king, who not yet king, one day sang to Saul, my Lord is sweetest in the morning. Like him, I wished to sing in advance of feeling, but that too, you said, that too is stealing. And that's on too. It's on? Oh. That's deluxe, okay. This is a poem about looking across a river in Moscow, and there used to be, I think it's defunct now, but a chocolate factory, and you could smell the sweet from over the river, the frozen river or the thawed river. It's from, when did he write it, like 92 or something? I don't remember.
94.
Okay.
And that,
Yeah, okay. And it comes, it's in these like five numbered parts, yeah. Okay. Across the river, they're making chocolate. Out there, the river ice is breaking up. And upriver, we're waiting, but for now, no bus comes, only its vacant ghost, a desolate, fleshless light flowing ahead to the engine's howl and the clatter of the ad slates changing. We're not cold, we bide our time, the sky a deeper blue, the burning streetlights.
To wait for each new minute as for a ghost. To put on stage paint for him alone. To powder your face with light. And poorly it's thick, but without it there's nothing to tell you apart. Not from the many faces, multitudes, but from the lived through years, which like a star are distant and weightless as smoke.
But from the sweet smoke, the glory of heaven. Look up for a moment, tear your eyes away, as from a book. As much a star has its shining or a factory its smoke, all things have their limit. A book's gilded edges or a band of cloud.
And turned from weddings not my own and graves, not waiting for the end, I rose and saw an enormous room, a hall, walls, Moscow, and I asked, where is the light that lit these pages? Where is the wind that rustled them like leaves?
It's late to be asking. Each person is lit bright, thrown open to the right dream, for the minutes like pupils, widened, unscathed like smoke or sleep. They fly in, gleam, collect a promise. Remember, take leave of me. And this is the last poem that Dashevsky wrote. He had a sort of genetic condition and died quite young. I think he was 47 or so.
He was 49, almost 50.
Okay. And we've just translated 2 versions of it because it was one of those poems that has many, many facets.
Well, we should say that's kind of how we work as co-translators. We are very often each coming up with a version and then we merge.
That's right, yeah.
And this one we were like, merge, and it just didn't work. It didn't want to merge, and we were like, this one has to stay in 2 versions.
Yeah.
I actually can't remember which one is mine.
I think this is yours.
Are you sure?
I'm sure because I had give thanks.
The E thing?
No, we both did it.
Oh, we both did it. Sorry. I thank you, wide-winged eagles, dashing to the deepest nooks of heaven. You crack your feathers, wings, and beaks. You perish squadron after squadron, breaking off from heaven's adamant combs. Ice, a shard at least to place in human mouth, and he will live one moment more.
I give thanks to you, wide-winged eagles, to the deepest corners of heaven rushing, shattering your pinions, beaks, wings, squadron by squadron perishing to break from that invincible heavenly honeycomb of ice, a grain to place in the mouth of a man, and he lives a moment more.
So that was amazing. I always want to hear translations next to each other. That's really brilliant. So we have some time for questions, comments, and our poets and translators, if you'd like, can come up here and take your questions and comments. That is, you must come up here. Come here, please, and take their questions and comments. Sorry, I was making it sound like it was awesome.
And we have a mic to pass around for your questions, so we can capture it on the recording and everyone can hear.
What are your questions? Yeah,
Like come up to the mic.
No, we can bring it to you. Yeah.
We can do a little dance.
I guess this is for both of y'all, but Ignacio, you talked about sort of a poem for ocean, and made me think of this kind of poetic idea of like a poet finding like a found ancestry and like a found historical through line of poets who come before them. And I was wondering if you kind of have, either of you kind of have thoughts of that poetic ancestry and like found history through translation as well, like in relation to that. because I would hope you're not translating poets that you don't give a fuck about. But yeah, that's my question.
I just tried to talk to my senior seminar on Latin American Studies about genealogy. So we'll see. But I really love Daniel Heath Justice has a beautiful, beautiful genealogy essay at the beginning of Why Indigenous Literatures Matter that taught me so much about thinking about that, like away from genealogy in the sort of theoretical sense of this is how you trace a certain concept or use of it through different historical moments and approaches. I really love that relationality. I don't know if I can muster one for myself. I suppose there's just so many moments and so many influences, you know? Like I know, I was thinking, listening to you read, like you're always going to be part of the family of word or something just because of the way that we got to, and who knows where I picked up with Thomas Alva and what it would have happened with it and stuff. But I would say it's definitely something that's crucial, and stop there and let you maybe take over if you have things to say about it.
No, it's a really generous question. I guess there's this poet that I really like called Jack Spicer, and he was also a translator. Translated Lorca very strangely and wonderfully. If you haven't read, it's like kind of a barn burner. Like just read it; it's great. But he says something about how, like all poets are like writing all over the world are writing the same poem across time, like one part of this poem, and of course we can't like know all of the poets, but we can have that sort of like, oh, the fleck of your poem is adjacent to mine in this moment, and therefore I take it with me or something, and it changes the way that my fleck of the poem actually behaves in this world-long poem. So it sounds utopian, but he's very scrappy, and he doesn't mean it like that. I think he just means it like this is a project we're all part of. I don't know if that's sort of the.
This is for Tommy. I noticed that a lot in your poems you had religious motifs, and from what I can tell, it sounds like you didn't have the greatest experience with it growing up. Personally, I'm a pastor's daughter, and as much as in the modern day, this is like the notion of Christ and Almighty Savior, I can't help myself but realize that I do believe in it. And as you have professed, like I said, a lot of religious motifs in your poem, how do you draw the line of religion as reality versus an allegory for your emotions?
Yeah. Oh boy, sure. Yeah, no, that's also a great question. And I guess it's kind of, one, as a person who also sort of helplessly believes in a greater being, maybe, I don't know if we can choose what our beliefs are, and my brain formed around the image of Christ, and I have to, that is what I inherited, and there are things to be, and I don't think that is necessarily, I think it's in a funny way, I'm not ungrateful for it, even though this was a particularly right-wing church, so it haunted me in all sorts of ways, and as we can see now, is haunting the nation, or more than haunting, actually possessing. But the image of Christ is multiple, and I think can be mercenarily ours to use as we need, and that can be a form of belief. So I guess that's kind of, and in that way I can certainly use these images as allegories. And the medievalists did, if we're going to go there. So yeah. I don't know if that gets at your question. Yeah.
Hi. I noticed in both of you guys' works, Timmy Straw, you mentioned you're a translator. I noticed in Ignacio's work, you were using multiple languages and stuff, and I couldn't help but wonder about what I might be missing out on for not knowing those original tongues. And I guess I just wanted to ask if you guys had any sorts of thoughts about what it means to attempt to
either bridge the gap between like this poem that's in one language and translating it into another, or sort of intentionally obscuring and like being sort of unapologetic about refusing to translate a piece, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So I guess I can say that's such a great question, and I think it's so difficult. I do translate other people's poems, and frankly, like the more that I think about it, the only reason that the most powerful reason for which I translate is like, damn, I know that there are people who can't read this in Spanish, and I speak English, so like that might help at least a couple people out, and they might have that aesthetic experience, and that's like enough of a reason. And a guide in a sense. I love refusal in the sense of like, I'm gonna sit here and speak a language that you don't speak, and you're just gonna have to listen to it. Because, right, like especially if you're thinking of like Spanish, yeah, but other minoritized languages like indigenous languages and things like that, it's like so much suppression happens and so much like dismissal and writing off of other minoritized languages as not worthy vessels of like aesthetic and art and reflection and philosophy, right? So most often things are getting translated out of those languages for whatever reason too, which in the speaking of the gap that you mentioned, that's a big gap, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I don't use Russian, and so I think, yeah, that was, but I felt like the moment when it shifts also has this, there's like an acceleration that you feel as well, so it's almost like there's a fugue, it's still, yeah, I could still hear it once you return to English, and it's funny, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because you end with that word, you know, it's like, and then it turns.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you both. These were just really beautiful readings. And I have a question for Timmy about the Psalms. And I don't know, I was sort of a chicken and egg question, but I'm wondering if you can locate which came first, your desire to take up King David in a sort of, political power gesture, or your desire to work from these beautiful pieces of writing.
Yeah.
One in response to the other.
Yeah, it's hard. I think they were sort of like, what are those coats that were really popular in the 80s that were like you could turn them inside out and have different, like it's such a stupid, but like that one was kind of informed by the other. I think, I mean, there's always that argument that like somehow art is ethical, and it just isn't. Like the Psalms are not ethical. Like, so that was an interesting question for me. When we're always kind of being asked to make the case for poetry as some kind of like, well, it's going to teach this or it's going to do this, and I mean, we're left with the fact that that's not where political change happens, and it's not where ethics happen, but something happens that we can't maybe put into language, ironically, and maybe even that unknowing is what is important and possible. So, yeah.